Hey gang, welcome back to Jet Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 8 in the 56 Chevy gasser build project. I left off in the last video. I had installed the steering box, connected the steering column to the steering box using a couple of U-joints and what's called a double D shaft, and that all seems to work. I know it's not the best configuration that is possible, but for what we're doing, it'll be fine. This car is not a drag car. It's going to be more of a show car. So I want to thank all of you for the feedback that you've given and leaving comments and thumbs up and all that sort of thing. That helps the channel and it helps encourage me to keep on making these videos. So by all means, keep it going. Now, I discussed in the last video some of the things that I need to address. One of those was the brake lines. As I mentioned, it has these braided, these are really interesting by the way. These lines are not only braided, but they have a plastic casing on the outside. So it's like 3 layers of material really. But these brake lines, they have a weird kind of shape to them. If you can make that out very well. I know it's hard to see it, but it's kind of a football shape with the ends cut off. How about that? So I talked about in the previous video about using some of these little tabs. Yeah, not the best idea. It seemed like it might work, but the problem is this is a perfect circle, or what we'll say is a perfect circle, right? And this has the football shape, so I would have had to grind the inside of this to try to make it fit. So I started doing some searching. I had somebody, I forget who it was at the moment, I apologize, somebody had sent me a link to Speedway Motors where they talked about the having those little brackets. So I thought maybe Summit will have it. I went to Summit. They didn't actually have it, but they had these other brackets, and these are a replica of a real GM bracket. And if you look in that hole right there, you can see that it's kind of lumpy. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know if I can get that in a good spot, but anyway, what that means is this will fit into that opening, and then the clip will fit on the outside. The advantage here is this thing can be indexed in many different locations. The limitation I had with the other one, I would have had to gotten it very close to perfect in order to have this hose line up on the caliper and then not want to twist when I welded the tab on, if you know what I'm saying. With this one, and I still may cut this ear off. I don't think we need this big ear. But with this one, I can put it anywhere that I need it, and it'll snap together. So, problem mostly solved on that. Also, as I mentioned, these gussets that I want to put on the cross member for the engine, so that'll come later on. And then we have one more thing, the Z-bar, or clutch arm, however you want to call it. Most people call this a Z-bar. It's not really a Z, but I guess in some ways you could, I don't know, shape it to be a Z somehow. But this is for the clutch. This part goes against the engine block, and this part is out in free space. This is going to take a little more work. The problem we've run into is the car had this ball mount on the frame, and this is the one I cut off. This fits the shaft. And basically this is about 0.740 inches, and that fits it very nicely. The real problem we have is the ball stud that goes to the engine block. Now this car was configured with a small block. So when you add something different like this big block, there's different parts involved. So this ball is like 0.875 if I remember correctly. Way too big. It's not going to fit. So the car owner had done some searching on the internet to try to find what would be the same size ball on this side. And unfortunately, most of the stuff you find online doesn't tell you what the size is. It just gives you a part number and tells you what it fits, but it doesn't give you these dimensions. So I found one that gave me a part number and it said 3/4 inch. Well, that's pretty close. So I took that part number, went to Summit. It wasn't 3/4. It was the same as this one, and this is the 875. So this is a new one that the car owner bought. And we have the one that came out of the big block. Now, I'm thinking about this and I'm going, you know what? Why don't I just modify this one? So that's what I'm going to do. And it may not be the normal way you would do this, but I'm going to give it a go. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. But we could take this into a machine shop and have them turn that down to the right size. I'm going to do it in my garage and see if I can't pull it off. Okay, other than those issues, I still have some welding to do on the crossmember for the engine and for the crossmember mounts on the transmission. So once I get the Z-bar figured out, I could pull the engine and transmission back out, do all the finished welding, and that's pretty close to being done. The only thing left after that is painting, and I'm going to have to do all the frame and whatever, get all that painted. So let me show you what I'm going to do to modify this pivot ball. So hey, check it out. I have a VTL, vertical turning lathe. Actually, it's just a drill press, but if you had one of these and it was a big heavy $10,000, $200,000 machine, vertical turning lathe is what this would be in essence. I'm just going to take this and chuck up the ball, the pivot ball. And the plan is, I'm going to try a couple different things, but I will probably use a 4-inch grinder with some sanding disc on it and try to shape that and get it down to the size that I need. So I'll keep track of that with the dial caliper to make sure I don't go too far and mess things up. But that's the plan. All right, there it is. This is the ball that I was talking about earlier, and I mentioned that it was approximately 740. This in 738, somewhere in that range. Now this one, freshly cut down, is actually right at 740. So take the shaft or the sleeve, let's say the Z-bar, whatever, boomsy, perfect. Yep, why not? Just do it yourself. Alright, let me show you how this is going to work. The Z-bar goes onto the newly turned ball, and then on the other end, this ball will be welded to the frame. The problem I'm going to run into is the alignment of the push pedal rod coming out of the firewall and this arm. I'm going to attach this so you can see what I'm looking at. If I take this bolt and I put it into the upper, or the rod, now this isn't totally tight, but if I line up, you got to line up the ball on each end. So there's a little variance right now because I don't have it fully adjusted. But this is at the pedal all the way at the top of the stroke. If you push forward on the pedal, what happens is the whole thing goes sideways. I don't know if you can see that very well. But you want to have this arm flow straight with this rod. So again, if I push this down, it goes sideways. What that does, it creates a bind, and we don't want that. What's the fix? Well, more than likely, I'm going to make a new arm for the Z-bar. I could try to extend this bolt, but it might be too long. And if I push this out further this direction, it might work, but I don't like it being on that long of a pivot point from the main part of it. So what I will consider doing, and this is going to take some fabrication, a little bit of fabrication. I'm going to replicate this arm that's on the end of the Z-bar as best I can anyway. But I don't feel like I can use this one, because if I just cut this off, I'm going to lose material and it's going to make the arm shorter. And I think that could be a problem. I may even need to make the arm just a little bit longer. So I'm going to use this. What I can do is lay this on top, trace out the shape and everything. It's basically the same thickness of metal, and I'll make it so that it slips over the pipe, not around it, but it'll just be like a half moon. And put this where I need it, tack that in, and then cut this one off. I can use this one as a reference if for location, let's say. So if I keep this one on, I can square this one up on the face of that one, and now I have the same throw on the Z-bar. Hope that makes sense. I'm going to experiment a little. You know, I've used this electronic level before, and I can tell you that the front of the car, the front cross member, is less than 1 degree off. So if I take this and I can set that on there, I don't know how well you can see that, but that is at 1.8. But I can move this around and figure out where level is, or relatively close. Now with doing that, now I can feel a little better about my placement. I still need to determine whether I'm square fore and aft, and that's just going to be a matter, for the most part, of eyeballing it. Now as I come forward to square that up, the angle goes up, so that tells me that what I need to do, not drop that, what I need to do is shorten up the leg on this slightly, grind off some of this material, and just kind of fine tune it up and down until I get it where it feels straight and it works. Okay, I think I have it where I want it, or at least where it'll be close enough, because it's not hypercritical that this is at absolute 0. But I am trying to make sure I have everything square and in place like it should be. And I know, I overdo this stuff, right? I overthink it. So I'm trying to leave a bit of a gap so I can take this apart, because that ball has to go inside the sleeve to come out of this side bracket, and I'm also trying to make sure I'm square as much as I can. So let me tack this in place. Okay, I like to show you even stuff that I do wrong because it's helpful. And so with putting this where it's at right now, I took the nut off of the post, the ball, pivot ball, and I pushed it in, and I can't take it apart. That's not good. I need to be able to disassemble this. So I've only tack welded this on, but this is why you test fit things, right? I need to be able to remove this. So I should probably have started further over this way and figured out where that happy place is. So I'll have to take this back off, move it out, and again, see where it needs to go. Thumbs down on that one. Hey, I just had a thought. I was looking at this after I took this off, and I was experimenting just to see how far away I would have to put this in order to get this apart. Basically, I don't need enough space for this to come around the bracket, if it makes sense. So it would have to be way over here, and that's just not going to work. But what I have seen in the past is this hole, instead of being just a hole, it's actually a slot. And what that allows me to do, I can take this, if I have the ball in there, I can angle it and slide it out of the slot. So that's going to be my fix. I may even put it at a slight angle. Now when I'm looking at this, realize that this arm, since it's pushing forward and let's say down, it's going to want to push back on that pivot point. So I'm going to make the slot in the front section so that it's kind of forcing it to go to the rear of the opening. Some more things to cut. Okay, so I've come up with this. Now this is the leading edge or the front edge, and I angled the slot slightly so you can slide that in. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. This makes more sense, but hey, learn from my misthought. So now I can put this in here, and just as an experiment, I can take that and slide it right out. So welded in, good to go. Okay, it's bolted in, but let me tell you, I thought I was done and I wasn't. I had to cut off kind of the front edge of the plate, and I had to trim the back edge of the Z-bar. I had to trim off this piece because it interfered with it going in. So now I have that will slip in, this clears, that'll drop in place, and of course that'll be tightened up later. There is some play in there, but that's okay. It'll line up whenever I get the rod on it. And of course I will need to relocate this arm. Right now, the way it is, I can probably get a bolt in there, get the mount bolt, but it's going to be really binding. Yeah, that's kind of hard to, it's actually pulling up at an angle. So that tells me that I'm going to have to, when I remove relocate that arm, that once I move it that way, I may also have to make it slightly longer. One thing I did do was kind of test this. I wanted to see if I was on plane, and this flows really nice. So I'm pretty happy with how this is right now. The next phase, well, of course, they'll be taking this piece of metal and remaking that piece so that it does what it needs to do. Okay, now that I know I can remove the Z-bar from the car without really any issues, I'm going to work on making this arm. I will point out this, in this pivot point here, this appears to be some sort of plastic bushing, and I think I can press that back out and get a hole size. I'm not worried about that at the moment. But what I want to do is make a tracing of this arm, and I'm going to make it longer than it needs to be so I can adjust my length later whenever I trim it off. So I'm going to just get this in place and see how far down I want to go, because I don't want to make a full circle because I obviously can't get it around the center post or the center pipe as it is. So that gives me a basic idea of what I want to do. I can trace that out, and then I can trim it back down later. Now to do this, I'm going to use a plasma cutter. And I have used in the past, let me show you. In the past I've used this Yes Welder Cut 55 DS. This thing works great. It's a lightweight unit. I have had no issues using this at all. there's my start. Now I need to cut this kind of a radius in the bottom. So here's what I ended up with. I should have pointed this out earlier. One of the things I had to do to make the Z-bar fit was trim off about 1/4 inch of material from the inboard side where it goes against the engine. But that made a great little piece to use when I was mocking this up. So this, I don't know if this is hot or not now, but I cut out that shape using the Cut 55 DS, and nothing to complain about there. Of course, this will all look better once I grind it down and clean it up and all that sort of thing. But there's a start to my new piece for the Z-bar. So I wanted to show you this. This is, again, the clutch rod Z-bar with the old bar piece still on it. I'm able to get a bolt through that, but as I come down with the pedal, that's as far as it goes, and then it binds. I really don't want to notch out the firewall to make that work. So I also want to make sure that this arm again is that way slightly. So if I discount that bar and I take the new one that I made, put it on, all I really need to do is extend this. It's not even 3/8 of an inch maybe overall. I know it's hard to see where I'm with my arm in the way. But extend this maybe 3/8 of an inch, and then move this inboard probably another 3/8 of an inch, and that should take care of it. So I'll get that in place, and then I'll work on making the new hole and trying to transfer this plastic bushing from inside of the old arm. So to give you some idea of what I've come up with here, I've taken two, what I would say is 3/4 inch nuts, and put them between the new arm and the old arm. That way the plane stays the same. And then I lined them up so that I would get the hole basically centered on the meat of the new piece. So yeah, I think that's going to work. Sorry, I'm trying not to block the camera. There we go. Nice. Okay, now I'm going to cut off this arm so I only have that inner one. So I wanted to show you this. I drilled a hole through this new arm, and I was talking about how they interacted, right? So using this small bolt as a reference, if I cycle this up, hopefully you can see where the rod goes up into the car. And that's why I wanted to make sure I had this correct at the bottom of the stroke rather than the top. Now the other thing is, of course, the rod will be on the inboard side of the swing arm, and I have this bushing that came out of the original arm, and I realized that I may have made this arm a little narrower than what was there, so I took the bushing and I turned it down slightly to get a smaller diameter so I could still use it and still have good edge distance on the sides. So I'll just step up that hole and be able to press that in, and that'll take care of the bushing. So here it is, all welded together, painted, and I just need to assemble some things. So the way this was set up before, the bushing went from the outside to the inside. this control arm or rod went from the inside to the outside. Put that together. This ball would have had this piece of felt in between it and the rod. So if I put that into the tube, slide it down, see what I'm doing. Get the washer in the way, okay. Tighten that up. I can take the bolt. Actually, the bolt had a washer on the outside. Run that through this little ring. Another washer. I don't remember exactly how the spacing was. I don't know if it matters that much. Connect the rod. Another washer. And let me just make that finger tight for now. So with that in place, that gives me, that's the range of motion. So I just wanted to verify one more time. Steering, everything clears the header. Clutch linkage clears the steering. So we're good to go. We are good to go at this point. Okay, now I am satisfied with everything interacting or not interacting with each other, let's say. I don't have any conflicts with binding the steering to the header or the clutch to the steering or any of that sort of thing. So at this point, I'm ready to take things apart. I didn't expect the Z-bar or bell crank, however you want to call it, to take this much time, but I also didn't expect to have trouble finding the clutch ball that we needed and having to customize it and all that other stuff. But that's just kind of par for the course anymore. Whenever you're building something like this, you have to expect that you have to modify things, and that's just the way it is. So the next video, I'm going to take all this back apart, pull the engine out, transmission out, separate everything. I do want to finish the welding on the cross members, as I mentioned previously. Finish welding that stuff, add some more weld to the brace for the clutch ball on the frame, any other welding that needs to take place, and then take the rest of it apart. Pull the axle out, clean up all the metal, and spray it and paint it. And then of course put all that back together, and then it's ready to go. So look forward to sharing that with you as soon as I can. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my patrons who support me in all of this. I'm very grateful to them and their support. If you're interested in helping out with that, there is a link down below. I also post links to any accounts that I may have, whether it's through Amazon or if I have sponsor stuff going on with the chop saw or Yes Welder. I try to post all those links as well down below. And if you get a chance, if you want to order something off of Amazon, you can still order something and then click on my link, and then if you process that, I get a little percentage out of whatever you spend. And it doesn't affect what you pay for anything. It's just kind of a kickback for me getting you there. So anyway, again, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.